evening, good afternoon, good morning. We're dancing away to the music there.
I know, I really was. I was like, I love this beat.
Fancy new introduction. So that's me getting all technical and all fancy, and which I don't do very well. So
it reminds me, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to make a new video every time I see it. Mine's just the generic countdown. So bravo.
Your what would they call them? The back screens. Your slides the other day. Your slides were they're stunning. I love them. Absolutely beautiful. So.
Oh, thanks. Jeez, you're so complimentary.
It's a British thing.
Yeah, you guys are nice over there. Us Americans, no.
So good evening, everybody. Welcome, and again, we've got some people in already. Just very quickly before we start, we've got a comment section. If anyone's got any questions or anything that you want to ask Katie or I about the Sinclair method, about how it works, anything to do with that side of things, please just ask away. And I'll introduce Katie from my side of things, but then I'll let her give a proper introduction. But Katie is what I would call the original YouTube pioneer for the Sinclair method. She does a lot more nowadays. There's Steve. Hi, Steve. But Katie has initially, when I first heard about the Sinclair method, Katie's videos on YouTube, what is the area that taught me so much about the Sinclair method and how it worked. And Katie has been through the program herself. So yeah, and amongst loads of other things that you do now for the Sinclair method and promoting it and teaching people and training and all that kind of stuff. So that's just a very, very brief introduction. There's Mrs. M. Hey, Mrs. M. And Karen as well. You might see Karen in the comments as well. Karen is, well, I'll let you introduce Karen, Katie.
Who's Karen? No, I'm just joking. Sorry, Karen. Do it. No, hello, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. And Karen, who's here in the chat, she's my co-founder at Thrive Alcohol Recovery. She's a success story of the Sinclair method. Interestingly, her and I both started the method around the same time, but we didn't know each other and our paths just began to cross. And we partnered up about a year and a half ago to launch Thrive Alcohol Recovery, where we offer an online program to guide people through the Sinclair method with video courses and resources and coaching support and really everything someone would need to be successful with the Sinclair method. So Karen has her personal experience with TSM as well, and also has been coaching people one-on-one for years through this treatment. Has an interesting background as well in kind of traditional recovery and health and wellness and things like that. Yep. So hello, everybody.
I keep threatening to get it. Maybe next month. Maybe next month, Karen, if you're up for it, we might get Karen on as well. We'll get everyone's wisdom. If she's, we'll have a chat about that behind the scenes. Hi, Matt, and welcome to everyone. Where are we going to start today? Naltrexone. What does naltrexone do? It's probably the best place to start.
Yeah, especially for people, I don't know like where people are at here, if they're new to it or if they're learning about it or if they've been on it for a while, but naltrexone is a powerful medication when used correctly to address alcohol use disorder. And when I say used correctly, it's really based on what the science has shown to be the most effective way to use the medicine. It's been around, here in the US, it's been approved for treatment of alcoholism since 1994. I don't know about where you are, Bruce. But it's sometimes prescribed in different ways, which I won't talk about. What I'll talk about today is really the most effective way to use it for most people, which is the Sinclair method protocol. Naltrexone, when following this protocol, is taken in a targeted dose before drinking, 1 to 2 hours before the first alcoholic drink of the day. And over time, when this medicine is taken repeatedly, and we're talking long-term, it takes time to see results on TSM. I love what you said, Bruce, a while ago, that it's not an instant fix, but it can be a permanent one. Over time, what happens for people when they drink on this medicine is that they just gradually see themselves regain control over alcohol. Their cravings for alcohol start to fade away. Their obsessive thoughts about alcohol They start to notice they have an off switch. So when they drink, they can stop after a few rather than binge drink till blackout. And then also for people who are daily drinkers, they notice that alcohol-free days just start to come more easily, whereas before maybe they were white-knuckled and forced. They start to have alcohol-free days without a lot of effort. They can be uncomfortable in the beginning and you know, a challenge for some people to achieve, but eventually for a lot of people, once they start to have them, they feel more natural. But naltrexone works so well because it's blocking the reward reinforcement our brain experiences when we drink. And a lot of people want to know, is that going to make drinking, you know, is it going to make me sick? Is it going to make drinking an unpleasurable or displeasurable experience? And the answer is no. It just makes it a little bit less interesting. It does change the drinking experience, but it's not a significant thing to where it's a, you know, a total deterrent. I know for me, I actually like to drink more on naltrexone because I had control. I had an off switch, so I could trust myself that if I took naltrexone and I was going out with my friends, I would probably just have 2 or 3 drinks and call it a night, as opposed to have a few drinks and stop at the store and get a bottle and drink until I blacked out and then wake up with a hangover the next day. And I know, Bruce, you and I are both super nerdy and passionate about the science. So I'd love to hear your take on the medicine too, and why it's so helpful for alcohol use disorder.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you said. I'll go into a bit of a nerdy stuff. They can actually measure the amount of endorphins that are being released in the brain as a result of any activity. So sorry, hi Ian, hi Matt, hi Julie. They can measure the amount of endorphins being released as any activity. Just to get out they measure in nanograms of endorphin. Just to get out your bed in the morning, you need to have somewhere in the region of 30 to 40 nanograms of endorphin in your brain, just to give you enough motivation and positiveness to get out of bed in the morning. The brain's natural high is around about 90 to 95 nanograms of endorphin. So when people with AUD are drinking, or alcohol dependency, that when you consume alcohol, the alcohol goes into your blood system. Through the system, it then goes up to the brain, and it's produced 1,200 nanograms of endorphin. Now that's a huge jump from 95 nanograms. So it goes from 95 up to 1,200. Now the science and everything is showing that, or the research is showing that a lot of people are receiving a much higher endorphin reward than others. So over a period of drinking, they become susceptible. They're more susceptible to the brain becoming dependent because they're getting this huge endorphin reward. So what naltrexone is doing is 2 very, very specific things. Well, it does one thing directly and the second thing indirectly, which is probably the better part as well. So the first thing it does, as Katie's saying, it's an opiate inhibitor, it's a blocker. It sits on the receptor in the brain, it reduces the amount of endorphin in the brain and gives the brain a lower reward. However, the important part is that Dr. Sinclair, after 30 years of research, he realized that with 50 milligrams of naltrexone, it doesn't drop it far enough down that the brain then goes back into craving or deprivation effect. It drops it enough so that the brain is still getting a reward from it, and the brain will very quickly adjust to the level of reward it's getting under the control of the naltrexone. So it's controlling the amount of endorphin that's being released. As a secondary effect, now when it does that, when you've been drinking for a number of years at 1,200 nanograms, the brain's neurological pathways will build up around about the 1,200 nanogram stage. So every time you see, drink, smell, drink, if you put your head under an MRI scan, if you go to an MRI scan and someone waves drink in front of you and you're dependent, it will release endorphin without you even drinking. So that's how powerful it is. So when you take the naltrexone, it drops it down, and at that level, the amount of the neurological pathways will start to rebuild at the lower level instead of the 1,200. So that's why over a period of time of taking the pill and drinking, you're then getting a lower reward. And I'll go back and ask Katie in a second about the on-off switch. But that's why all the clients that we speak to initially, they say to us, the standard thing right across the board is my on-off switch doesn't work. One drink is not enough, 10 drinks is not enough, 20 drinks is not enough. And that's because the brain's getting this high endorphin reward. When you reduce it down, the on-off button starts to work again, and then you can have 2 or 3 drinks and make a conscious, like, okay, I've had enough, I want to stop. Because the only thing that drives AUD or alcohol dependency is the high endorphin reward. So all naltrexone is controlling that and then rebuilding the neurological pathways. And in the words of Dr. Sinclair, it de-addicts the addicted brain by rewiring the pathways. So sorry, Katie, that was a long
No, it's
you mentioned the on-off button. Can you explain? Well, how did it work with you?
Yeah, so like you said, I had no off switch to where, like, I would try to set limits of just, okay, 2 glasses of wine tonight, and I'd pour it to the very brim and consider that a glass. But what would happen for me after I finished those 2 glasses before the Sinclair method is I would just feel annoyed that I couldn't drink anymore. My brain would just be thinking, oh, I want more, I want more, I want more. And I'd really have to force myself to not drink. I'd have to put the bottle away. I'd have to distract myself. I'd maybe go to bed. I would just really be doing anything I can to not have a 3rd glass or a 4th glass or a 5th glass. And so, that was really me not having an off switch around drinking. And to be honest, most nights I didn't like put that limit on it. That was when I was like trying to be disciplined. Most nights I would drink usually a bottle. A couple nights a week, I'd usually drink more and then binge drink on the weekends. But I would drink until I just got so tired that I would like black out or pass out usually. And that's true with a lot of people who experience alcohol use disorder. It's just like there's no off signal telling them to stop. Whereas with naltrexone and the Sinclair method, when I started on that, and it was a gradual process, but I could just see that, I'd have a couple of glasses and I just wouldn't have that inclination to have a 3rd, or it would be easier for me to kind of question whether or not I wanted it, where the desire really wasn't there as strongly. And this became more prominent over time. Initially it wasn't as obvious, but the more I could pay attention and just ask myself questions like, okay, I've had 2 glasses. Where's my craving level for a 3rd? Do I really want a 3rd? And oftentimes, especially the longer I was on the method, I wouldn't really desire another drink, or maybe I'd pour it and then I couldn't finish it. And so that was the way naltrexone was starting to give me an off switch. And when people don't have alcohol use disorder, typically they have an off switch. Like my husband, he can have 2 glasses of wine, maybe a 3rd, but it's very rare that I see him drink that amount, and he just stops because he doesn't want any more. And really what's happening is the pleasurable effects that he was getting from alcohol, it's no longer pleasurable. It becomes kind of aversive, I guess you could say. Not in a terrible way, but just like, I don't really feel like a 3rd. Like how if we have a big piece of chocolate cake, we might really enjoy it and it's tasty, but the thought of having another big piece of cake is like, that sounds a little gross. Like I don't need more sugar. So through naltrexone, it helps us develop that off switch to where, over time, the thought of having that 3rd, 4th, or 5th drink just doesn't sound as appealing. And this helps people ultimately get to a place of moderate controlled drinking. Now, as you and I both know, people can drink beyond that point. And a lot of people will say, oh, I noticed that naltrexone is giving me an off switch that I don't want to drink, but I keep drinking anyway. And that's where, habit change comes in, and behavior change, and developing new coping tools, and all of those things that we talk a lot about. Because without that, if someone's just relying on the medication exclusively, they're not, it's really easy to drink through the medicine. Like I said, for me, I had to kind of check in with myself and see where my craving was at. And if I didn't have a strong craving, then why was I having another glass? What else could I do instead? And this mindfulness work and curiosity work really helps people with the medicine. But the medication is incredibly powerful when you help it do its job in that way.
And there was something else you mentioned there as well was, sorry, if anyone's here and you've got any questions, please fire away in the comments and we'll see if we can answer any questions if anyone's got any.
Yeah.
But something you mentioned just there as well was drinking to blackout.
Yeah.
And something I learned the other day, again, I do a lot of sort of reading and bits and pieces, either on the internet or through books. I've been reading a book by a professor here in the UK who's done a lot of study on the neurological side of alcohol and the effects of alcohol, etc., etc. And through the research that he's done, he found that there are different stages of drunkenness, is how he describes it. You have your first drink, you start feeling a little bit light and a little bit relaxed, etc., etc. And there's reasons, there are neurological explanations for that. You then go to the next stage where you start losing a little bit of your cognitive thinking, etc., etc., etc. There's a whole process, a ladder that you go through. The drinking to blackout actually comes about because what you're doing is, with alcohol, is you're putting ethanol into your system. Now, what then happens is that goes into your blood system, it goes up to your brain, it then gets people drunker and drunker and drunker. Now, when the on-off button doesn't work, we would just keep drinking and keep drinking and keep drinking. So the reason we speak to a lot of people who then go to blackout with drink, or some of the clients do anyway, that's because the brain gets to a certain level. Now it works it out. It does it naturally. When the alcohol level in the blood reaches a certain level in the brain, the brain will then naturally produce an anesthetic. So it will release an anesthetic into the brain, which actually causes blackout, and it's the brain's natural way of trying to stop someone from drinking, because if they carry on drinking like that, then it's not good for the system, because you're putting ethanol, you're putting poison. So it's the brain's natural way of saying stop, it's enough.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of the times when we get clients on the programs, they say, Bruce or Katie, I'm drinking to blackout.
Yeah.
When they come on the program, they drink less. I'm not having any blackouts anymore, Bruce. And it's because the volume of alcohol has come down, that the brain's not getting to the alcohol level in the blood to the stage it's producing the anesthetic and blacking out.
Wow.
It's a fascinating book when you see the actual stages of drunkenness, or they can neurologically track every single thing, and that's why they come to a certain level for, you would call it DUI.
Yeah.
For DUI or drunk driving in this country, we call it. We're a bit more blunter.
Yeah. Driving under the influence. Yeah.
Driving under the influence, no, drunk driving.
Yeah.
But that's why they come to the level that they do, because they can work out the science and the neuroscience of the levels of drunkenness and what the body is capable of doing and not doing at each level. So,
do you understand? I was just chatting with someone yesterday, and I've heard this before, people who say they black out really easily, like after just a couple of drinks, and maybe their friends don't even know that they're blacked out because they're not that intoxicated, but they themselves, they don't remember it. Like they're blacked out. Do you know anything about that? Why it happens for some people earlier or at a lower level of alcohol intake?
No, is the honest answer. The only thing I could possibly guess at, and this is a guess, is that if it's someone that's drinking regularly, then the alcohol in the blood system is never getting below a certain level. So that only takes them a few drinks to get to that point. Or they might have a lower level of whatever the neuroscience is on that one. I don't know, is the honest answer.
Okay, interesting.
I'm going to have a look. That'll be next month's topic.
Yeah.
So sorry, I forgot to say Happy New Year to everyone. Jane saying Happy New Year, and Len and everyone saying Happy New Year. Sorry, we forgot to say that, didn't we? So, and everyone's brain and the way they respond to alcohol is subtly different. Yeah. So I was just saying to Katie as well, I actually went out at Christmas and got drunk. So I have to admit, to put my hand up.
Well, and I was telling you, I love that you shared that, Bruce, because in our group meeting and in our program, several of our members had increased their drinking over the holidays, and we're kind of like, oh, my drinking's going up and not feeling great about it. And I just kind of said in passing, well, remember that even people without alcohol use disorder drink a lot over the holidays or can get drunk. And that hit home for them, like something they needed to hear. And I think you're just a perfect example of that. Like, you don't have an alcohol problem, you drink on occasion, and here you are, getting intoxicated around the holidays. So it happens. Was it fun? How was it?
The interesting thing that I now remember why I don't do it. I've learned, again, a lot of you guys know me, but I'm 55 now. I actually had quite a bad drug problem in my 20s. And what I've learned from the Sinclair method is that the release of endorphin in the brain is the same whether you are whatever substance you're taking. So I happen to go down the drug road. The Sinclair method deals with alcohol. So the effect is different on the drugs that I took, the actual feeling and the effect, but it's the same principle from the neurological point of view in the brain. So it's quite interesting when I went out and I was drinking. I don't drink not because I've ever had a drink problem, but I've had a drug problem. But I don't drink because I know how quickly I could get into danger with it. Subconsciously, I've always known that, and the Sinclair method has just confirmed it to me. But again, I went out around about New Year time. You won't have pints. We drink pints in this country, which is it's a pint. It's a pint. Yeah. It's about how much a pint is.
We have pints.
I went
here.
out. Yeah, I went out. Bear in mind, I haven't drunk for over 12 months. I had 5 pints of Guinness. I had 4 double rum and cokes. I had 2 cocktails and 6 shots, I think. And Mandy, my wife, picked me up and she said, "I thought you were drinking tonight." And I said, "I have." And I told her how much I'd drunk, and she said, "You don't even look like you've had 2 drinks." And I'll be honest with you, it scared the living daylights out of me. Wow. Because I came home, I was just as not sober. I could feel it, but it was. I should have been absolutely legless. That's an expression. I don't know if that's an American expression. I should have been completely
plastered.
Not in a good plastered. Not in a good state. But that's what Steve's saying. That's why I said it. Steve says you can't imagine it. No, you don't want to see that. But my body seemed to just, and bear in mind I haven't drunk for a year, and that's why I know how quickly I could get into trouble with the whole thing.
Yeah.
So the next thing I need to do is take naltrexone and then go and have a drink, and we'll do it as on one of your extinction session things. Bruce on an extinction session.
Have you ever taken naltrexone, Bruce?
No.
Oh my gosh, yes, you need to.
No. I keep saying to some of my clients, I said, "You need to post me one," and they, "No, don't do that. That's illegal."
Yeah, I know.
I have never done that, just in case anyone's watching this from the police. So.
Yeah.
And I never will.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, you should try drinking on it sometime. I'd be curious how you would respond to it.
Yeah, I'll need to go. I'll speak to my doctor and see if they could prescribe me something. So
yeah.
So someone's going, ooh. So back to the Sinclair method. Any questions come in yet? No.
I see Jane mentioned I'm totally in the place you just described, Katie. So I'm not sure what I was describing when I said that, maybe about drinking through the naltrexone. So if anyone has any questions about that, let me know.
I'll ask you a question that came up today with a client that I spoke to, and see if it's come up with you. That, how can I describe this? It is possible to relapse on the Sinclair method. If somebody doesn't take the medication. Have you had much dealings? That's not very good English. Have you had many dealings with clients who have done really well for a period of time and then stopped taking the medication? And then how did you find the process afterwards once they'd gone back on it, if they had gone back on it, from then onwards?
Yeah, it happens, and it's basically just lack of compliance with the medicine or the, adherence to taking the medication correctly and following the protocol. And that's true for any medicine someone is on. I was talking to someone here in the US who runs a recovery program centered around like supplements and nutrition, and, even getting people to take like the vitamins they need to take daily. He's like, it's really hard. Like they just won't do it. And vitamins are rather benign, it's not blocking anything or whatever. So adherence is challenging with any protocol, and that's certainly true for the Sinclair method as well. And yes, even just this week, someone was on our group call who had fallen off and stopped taking the medicine for whatever reason. It happens for a number of reasons, where someone's left without the medicine, or they genuinely forget, or they think, oh, I don't need it, or maybe they just do it on purpose and want to get that, euphoria and buzz from alcohol that naltrexone blocks. So yes, it does happen. And what's unfortunate about it is that for some people, it can really spiral into a binge. And we know that when someone's drinking on naltrexone repeatedly, the receptors are blocked in the brain, so they're not getting that huge reinforcement and that reward. But when they become unblocked without naltrexone and someone drinks, it can almost be like this extremely reinforcing experience, to where it's like their brain remembers all this pleasure from alcohol that it hasn't been getting for months and months. And so it can cause this rebound effect that can essentially result in a terrible relapse. And I've seen that happen, which is like the worst case scenario. And then I've also seen people who do it once or twice and they're like, oh, I feel like I was still experiencing the effects of naltrexone, but I could see how my drinking could get back out of control. So I'm going to kind of get back on the medicine treatment. So in my opinion, it's really playing with fire. Like, it's something you at all costs want to avoid if you can, but it does happen for one reason or another. And I think, for most people, what happens is once they're ready to recommit to it, the medicine starts working again, maybe like it did before or close to like it did before. And the person that was on our call this week, I asked him, do you feel like it was working as well as it did the first time or when you first initially started it? And he said felt like it was taking a little bit longer the second time around. Like, he wasn't seeing as obvious of results after he went off the medicine, but he does notice that it's working. So what's great about naltrexone and TSM is that if someone does that, they can always restart and see the results. Again, it's not like it makes it so TSM doesn't work for them. Now, did they reverse progress? Probably. It depends how long they were drinking without compliance. But if they're, committed to it again, the second, third, or fourth time around, they will see, progress over time. And even one of our coaches, Samara, at Thrive, she did the Sinclair method, and it was her second attempt that made her successful, because she kind of dabbled with it the first time and wasn't always taking it and kind of thought, oh, I don't need the medicine. And so she's just, one example of countless others where, people should take it really seriously, the compliance piece, but it's not the end of the world if they go off of it. The consequences are kind of unknown. So like I said, it's like playing with fire, but they can always restart it again. What about you? What has been your experience with it, with your clients you work with?
Yeah, I found that this is going to sound completely strange, and and like you were just saying, Katie, I wouldn't recommend it as an option to try, but some people, for certain reasons, I think have to go through the process. I've had a few clients that it has happened to, obviously. They've gone through the process where they've stopped taking the naltrexone. Most of the time it happens because of stress or an upturn in difficult situation or circumstances. There's a long explanation to that. Well, no, I'll explain it quickly. When someone is reducing and reducing and reducing, if life at that time is quite comfortable and safe and everything is going on is great, then it's no problem. So people will be reducing then. The hardest part in the Sinclair method is not the craving and the addiction. It's learning to deal with life without the level of alcohol that they were used to. So during the period of reduction, if that period of time is fairly okay and there's not too many hiccups in life, then it's great. And then once people get to the lower levels, all of a sudden they hit a situation in life where they just hit a hard patch in life. Change in circumstances, loss of a loved one or something, or stress at work or something. Then what happens, they'll say, okay, well, I'll just not take the drink. I'll not take the medication for a while. I just need to numb out, is probably the expression. I need to numb out for a few days just to get me through this. Because I haven't adjusted emotionally to the level that they're at.
Yeah.
Because they haven't on a day-to-day basis, but then all of a sudden they've got something that happened, or something that's happened, and they haven't dealt with that level of emotional turmoil with that lower level of drink. So they'll then go into not taking the pill. However, the people that I've spoken to that have done it, they're not taking the medication for whatever reason, like Katie was saying, sometimes they come back to me and they'll say, I think I had to go through that, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
I had to know. Sometimes it's like they think that you start to think it's a placebo, or sometimes it's I've explained it recently to a client, and it's like going back into a bad relationship that you know you shouldn't be in. You've been away from it for a while, but you break away from a relationship that you shouldn't be in. But now that you're back on your own again, you go through a stage where you're starting to feel a little bit lonely. So you go back into the bad relationship, because that bad relationship is better than being on your own. So therefore, and then once you get back into that relationship again, you go, actually, I remember why I left that.
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
Sometimes people have to go back. They have to get to that point where they go back a little bit and they go, actually, no, hang on a minute. The reason I've left that is because it wasn't fun to be in. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people have to go through it. Sometimes it can be for a number of reasons. But the golden rule is get back on the pill. Sorry, just one other thing, Katie. I had one guy who did it. He did relapse. He went back up to a bottle of whiskey and 2 bottles of wine a day for 6 weeks. Long story short, we managed to get his mum to go round to the house and literally stick a pill down his throat.
Wow.
Now, he'll speak to me today and he'll say to me, I cannot remember my mum coming round and giving me a pill. He says, I can't remember. So I said to him, I want you to go around as early as you can in the morning and at 6 o'clock at night and give him 2 pills. And he said he can't remember his mum doing that. But here's the amazing thing with naltrexone. He had no idea it was happening, but it had enough of effect on him that the brain, the endorphin level reduced enough for him to get 2 to 3 hours of alcohol free during the day, where I could get in, where we could get a rational conversation with him to then start working the program back. And within 4 weeks, he was back to where he was. So the medication, that's where I got the excitement on the medication. The medication worked and he didn't even realize he was taking it.
Wow.
So
yeah, and it's, when someone doesn't have, I don't know what that situation was, if that person had, personal drive and motivation to do this themselves, but that's something that's been coming up more lately, where there's been a few instances where like parents or spouses want their loved one to join our program and start TSM. And it's so difficult to get someone to follow this protocol and adhere to it, for the time necessary, if they're not personally motivated themselves. That personal desire to make this change is absolutely crucial, because kind of like what you were saying, Bruce, if naltrexone is going to help reduce the desire to drink, and people will sometimes relapse or drink without naltrexone because they, want to use alcohol as a coping tool, or they just want to get drunk. And when we go on this treatment over time, we have to become someone who no longer turns to alcohol to get drunk or to numb out. And it's a gradual process. It's not an overnight thing, but we really have to redefine our relationship with alcohol and want this different version of ourselves that isn't someone who identifies as a person that needs alcohol at 5 o'clock every night to cope with stress, or needs alcohol because it makes life more tolerable or bearable. And so it's really a process of changing your identity when you change your relationship with alcohol, changing your beliefs about alcohol, and all of these things that have been intertwined with our patterns of drinking and heavy drinking. It doesn't mean we're abstinent. It means, we become someone who enjoys alcohol maybe for the taste or for the occasion or the environment we're in, but we're no longer using it to get drunk, or, even just for the escape effect of it. And all this to say, I think if someone doesn't have that personal desire to make this change themselves, it's just going to be an uphill battle. And my heart honestly breaks for the loved ones who just want this so badly for their, kids or spouses or whomever, and they want it more than they want it for themselves. And that's true with anything. If someone needs to lose weight and their husband wants them to lose weight, they're not going to be able to do it if their husband wants them to do it. They're going to have to want to make this lifestyle change themselves. And it's true with naltrexone and the Sinclair method as well. Even though there's a pill and it does work neurologically to, reverse alcohol use disorder, there becomes the issue of compliance and the issue of people just, drinking through the pill because they're not internally motivated enough to change habits, behaviors, and really change their relationship with alcohol at its core. Yeah.
An exciting thing that I heard a while ago, and it changed the way that I worked with clients big time, was that when I was working in the rehab centers, we were always taught that people who drink, and especially people who relapse, that people drink and relapse because of unresolved issues.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason people can't stay sober is because they haven't dealt with all their unresolved issues. So therefore, that's what drives them to relapse, and bang, bang, bang. So what I learned with the Sinclair method is, as people are reducing down the way on their drinking levels, life picks up, the sleep gets better, the food gets better, the nutrition gets better, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, a lot of that is actually down to sleep, which is I believe, which is a story for another night. But so what I learned was that it wasn't actually the unresolved issues that was causing the relapses.
Mm-hmm.
It was the build up of the craving that was causing the relapse.
Yeah.
Now, again, that's on an abstinent based setup. So what I've then learned on the Sinclair method is that most people, as they're reducing, depending on how long they've been drinking, when they've been drinking, etc., 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 will be very, 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 what's the word? Everyone's journey is completely different. So as someone is reducing down the way, I had a lady who, the minute she started reducing, just struggled completely. I absolutely just could not cope. Now, there was a lot of stuff going on at the time in her life that actually we were having to, like I said before, she was reducing her drink. The hardest part of the Sinclair method is dealing with life without the alcohol. Yeah. Her existing situation was so difficult that she was finding the alcohol there and then, when I was dealing with it, was a crutch. It was her way of surviving. So what we then did, because it was a current situation, was we then found, or we passed the lady on to specialist support for therapy, for counselling, etc., etc. Now, alongside that counselling and support, that was one issue, but the dependency was another issue. So it's very, very important, I believe, to realise that yes, the two are intertwined and working together at the same time, but we have to treat them separately.
Yeah.
Which was the main thing that I learned, because once the brain becomes dependent, the brain is dependent. So the issue with the reason I'm saying about the rehabs is, so many people think that once you relapse, in her situation it might have been, but in a lot of people's cases it's not.
Yeah.
But we have to be aware of, sometimes, I know Claudia will talk a lot about this now, that sometimes that counselling is still needed for some people, therapy is still needed for some people, just to deal with. I know I went through a lot of counselling when I stopped taking drugs, and that was just to deal with a lot of emotional stuff that I hadn't dealt with, and I was blocking out with drugs for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and that, I tell this a lot, but when I started TSM, I was kind of naive to the fact that I was using alcohol as such a prominent coping tool. I was like, oh, I just like to drink and party, and this pill will help me drink less. But a few months in, memories and emotions started to surface that I realized I'd been suppressing with alcohol. Or anytime I felt stressed or sad or depressed or angry, I would just be like, okay, I'll drink tonight, and not really deal with it. And so learning to deal with those very uncomfortable emotions when you're out of practice feeling them, learning to get through those without constantly reaching for alcohol or numbing out in other ways is a process. And I remember often I tell the story, the first time I felt genuine anger without reaching for alcohol, it was like almost overwhelming. And I was like, whoa, this is insane. I was very tempted to reach for alcohol because feeling angry is an uncomfortable emotion. Like, it's not very pleasant. But I got through it within a couple of hours. And I remember I just had this like natural high at the end of it, because I got through it. I felt better. I was completely sober. And I was just like, whoa, that was really cool. Like, I watched myself go through this hard experience where previously I would numb out with whiskey or wine. And this time I just dealt with it in a healthy way. And when we see ourselves get through situations like that in the recovery world, it's called recovery capital, but you're really building up this capital, if you will, of, this character building and becoming this person that you want to become, and becoming a stronger version of yourself that can get through things without relying on a crutch. And that is real freedom, when you know that you can conquer whatever life throws at you without needing something to get through it. That's just such an incredible feeling. And I often, talk about our coping muscle being something that gets weakened when we drink a lot. And over time, like going to a gym and building a muscle a natural way, we have to practice building our coping muscle. And at first it's going to be difficult. We're not going to really see any change, but with repetition over time, it gets easier and easier. And before you know it, you realize, oh, I'm naturally created to be able to cope with these tough things. I don't need alcohol anymore. And it's really just about breaking the habit and the pattern around it. And like I was talking about earlier, just getting to the root of those beliefs that might be driving your behaviors that are operating, and driving your actions. Like someone that believes I need alcohol in order to cope with stress, or wine is the only thing that makes me feel better. These were some of mine, and really cutting those beliefs off at the root and realizing, okay, I don't want to operate from these beliefs anymore. I don't want to feel like I need wine anymore to cope. And that's a process. There's a lot of inner work that has to come along with it. But
I remember Claudia talking. I'm just going to be careful that I'm not saying something I shouldn't be saying here. Just for privacy for Claudia. I'm sure she's been public about this. But Claudia did lose someone close to her a couple of years ago. Oh. And I always remember her saying that if that had happened to her however many years ago, the first thing she would have done was turn to drink, and the drink would have got her through the process. But she said this time, because she wasn't drinking, she said the whole process wasn't easy. Mm-hmm. But she said that she naturally grieved through the whole process. And she said instead of jumping into a drink, she naturally grieved. And she said that wasn't easy. It's not easy. She said, however, it was so much healthier for her. Mm-hmm. She said, because she went through the natural grieving process, which is not a nice thing to go through at all. But if you don't go through the process, then it will build up inside and chew away, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then it will come out in other areas. So sometimes, I mean, not in every case. Don't take it in every case, but with anyone that's listening, if a lot of the times, I'll just give you another example as well. I worked with a guy who'd been through a really, really bad divorce 20 years ago. He had started drinking heavily 20 years ago. The brain possibly became dependent 20 years ago. He met his new wife, very happily married, great job, great car, great kids, etc., but was now dependent on alcohol. So when he'd been into rehab, people had said to him, you haven't dealt with the issues from your marriage from 20 years ago. And so he went into counseling and more counseling and more counseling, and kept relapsing, and more counseling and relapsing and more counseling and relapsing. And eventually he got counseled out and kept on relapsing. So when he got on the Sinclair method, he just went boom, 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 boom. And he came on, I remember him to this day, he came on and said, Bruce, I don't want any of your mumbo jumbo stuff. He said, I don't want any counseling and that. Talk about my feelings and everything. He said, I just want my drink sorted. I went, right, okay. And it did. He just went bang, 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 bang. But he then suddenly realized, he said, so many people have told me that I keep relapsing because of what happened 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now he said, yes, there are issues and stuff. He says, but I'm happily married with 3 kids today. But and then when he understood the neuroscience of relapse, he then realized the reason I'm relapsing is not because of 20 years ago, but because my brain is craving alcohol. Now that doesn't mean that's his situation. Now in some other situation, there is still situations, like when I stopped taking drugs, there were still situations from my childhood that I needed counseling for and I needed to work through. So this is where the Sinclair method, and this is what I was going to say to you, Katie, was that the importance of what Katie and Karen do in the States and what we do across here is because of this whole process. I think that that you need backup and you need support to support you and get you through the whole process. And that's why what Katie and Karen do is so vital. The one-to-one or the program backup support, where you have access to someone to say, listen, they understand naltrexone, they understand the Sinclair method, they understand the steps of it, and they can also talk you through it in different stages. So,
yeah.
So
yeah, and just having a different perspective to someone to give you guidance, because this is a long-term treatment protocol, so it's easy to kind of lose sight of things or not know which next steps to take, whether that's in a week or a month from now. And just having that source of support to turn to make sure, okay, is this normal? Should I be expecting this? Because I think I hear from people all the time who start this method or doing it on their own, and they have unrealistic expectations, and then they give up a couple months in, or they think that it's not going to work for them, so they stop using the medicine, or they're just not taking the medicine correctly and following the protocol correctly or giving enough time to work. So just having that source of support to plug into whatever it is for an individual, I think it can definitely help this process along. And also, to your point, recognizing that everyone starts this method at different phases in the life. Like you gave your example of a client who's happily married with 3 kids. He may see faster results on the Sinclair method than someone who just got divorced and has been drinking through the divorce, or they've had a death in the family. Or if they've been drinking for 40 years and this person's only been drinking for 5 years, that's not a hard and fast rule. But not everyone starts this method with like the same environmental factors and emotional factors and baggage, if you will. So honoring that, I think sometimes when people start this method, it's easy to look at those who reached extinction really quickly and just breezed through it. I hear that all of the time. Well, like, why did this person see those results and I'm not? And those are more, I think, the minority of cases, at least from what I've seen. Yes, there are people that respond super quickly and just get there in a matter of a few months, but most people, it takes a little bit longer, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years. We had a member in our program recently who's been at this for going on 3 years, and she'd seen amazing results, but was still drinking more than she wanted to. And what happened for her recently was that her husband was always her drinking buddy, and he was not doing TSM. And so his drinking that he was still continuing to do was influencing her and her Sinclair method journey. So it was like she was seeing progress, but she was also like partnered with someone who was drinking a lot. And he started TSM with her after she'd been on it for a couple of years. And now she's like, I'm at extinction, like I'm hardly drinking. And that one environmental change was like the deal, or it was the make or break thing for her. And so for people to realize that it can be something as subtle as your environment or the people you're hanging around that can be, prolonging your Sinclair method experience. There's so many nuances to this treatment. And again, that's where support can come in, just to have that, guidance and clarity from, an expert or someone who's several steps ahead of you on this journey. Because we often, see it's these like small, subtle changes that can make the biggest difference over time.
Is there something, one or two things or whatever, is there something that you see people doing regularly or not doing regularly, or something that, what am I trying to say here? The question, is there something that you see that would make someone's journey easier or quicker or more comfortable?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, what's coming to mind for me, goes back to that inner work that's going to help somebody to feel motivated on this journey. And motivation is going to come and go, but to really be in a place where I think at the start of it, you have your understanding of why you want to make this change. For a lot of people, it's, making a huge long list of all of the different reasons why you want to change your drinking, why you want to go on the Sinclair method, and revisiting that every day so that you're feeding your conscious mind all of the time, reminding yourself why you want to do this. And then simultaneously having that vision of like, what does it look like 6 months or a year from now? So you can be excited about the future, and that can kind of pull you forward. I honestly think the thing that causes people to take longer on this method, and there's nothing wrong with it, there's no race to extinction. Like, we want people to make sustainable changes. But I think, like, the thing that can kind of hold people up is just that excitement about what the future looks like when they don't have alcohol use disorder, or maybe they're in a little bit of fear. I know I was about like, who am I when I don't have this problem? Who am I when I don't drink wine every night? And that can be terrifying. And it can cause people to kind of stay stuck in habitual patterns that are in alignment with who they are today. The default choice, if you will, of, oh yeah, I always drink a bottle of wine every night. They can stay stuck there even on TSM. But if they have, clarity on why they want to make this change and then something to kind of aim at toward the future, I think it can help them to stay committed through this process. That's not necessarily something that's tangible, but I think doing that inner work so that you feel really motivated and excited for your success on this treatment, it's going to help people, have the motivation to practice mindfulness, have the motivation to log their drinks, or not necessarily motivation, but the discipline to be able to do these things that are taking them where they want to go. Because without that, if you're not aiming at something and you're just kind of going about this, waiting for the pill to do all of the work, you're not going to have the structure in place to log drinks, be mindful, change habits, like all of those actionable things that are really necessary to make this change. The source of those are, that internal work of really mentally preparing for this and getting in the right mindset of what it means to be successful on TSM.
And I think the changes. I mean, I always say to people that there are AUD or alcohol dependency consists of two things. One is the physical addiction stroke craving side of the whole thing. Yeah. The other side is the habitual process. The naltrexone will deal with the physical neurological process 100%, but we have to work with the habitual side of it and change habits and everything that Katie's saying. The biggest mistake I see people making is trying to make too big a change too quickly.
Yeah.
Right across the board. I mean, people they jump in. Most people will see an initial reduction when they first start on naltrexone, and then what happens is it then levels out a little bit, and it's at that stage you then get into what Katie was talking about, the personal stuff, the one, not the one-to-one, the habitual change, changing up what you're drinking, when you're drinking, going for more walks, going for runs, all that kind of stuff. But what then tends to happen is people will see it starting to work, and then all of a sudden they'll try and make a huge big step, and then they can't sustain it. So then they'll then try something else, and then try something else, and try something else, and before you know it, they're all over the place. So what I will try and say to people is, even when you come on here, you're going to hear some good ideas when you come on here, when you go into Zoom meetings, when you go into Facebooks, when you go into everything, you'll see good ideas. But what I say to people is, if you hear a good idea, write it down, because you'll be able to implement it in the future. But write it down. But don't suddenly change what you're doing just now because you've heard this good idea. And then next week you'll hear another good idea, and the next week you'll hear another good idea. So what happens? You're all over the place. Write it down and absolutely implement it down the track. Yeah. But something as simple as starting your drinking time from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock alongside naltrexone, do that for 1 week and do nothing else. Nothing else. And then do something else the following week. But if you're going from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock and you're trying to take all your nutritions and you're trying to run a marathon and you're trying to do this and another, you're going to burn yourself out, or it's not going to last for more than a week.
Yeah.
And that then happens. People get despondent, and then eventually they stop taking the medication, and that's how it stops. So just take. Katie said it earlier on, that there's no rush. It's not it's a lifestyle, a lifetime thing. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And we always talk about just setting really small goals that, are a little bit of a stretch, but you are pretty sure you can achieve them, just so you can see yourself continually make progress, because the greatest form of motivation is progress. So if you have a goal to set your drink time back an hour and just focus on that, and, it feels doable, but it also is a little bit of a challenge, that's great. And do that until you feel like you've mastered it, and then move on to the next thing. If you read any habit change book, they're called Tiny Habits, or, there's all kinds of them out there, Atomic Habits, but it's all about these small little changes that you do incrementally and sustainably over time. And I think that translates so well to the Sinclair method as well, because what a lot of people find with the naltrexone, what it does is over time, it brings to light how much they're drinking habitually. That's what I hear over and over again. I'm sure you do too, Bruce. It's like, oh, I notice I don't want to drink, but I'm taking naltrexone and drinking anyway, or I notice I don't want a fourth drink, but I'm drinking it anyway. And that's really the habit playing out. And so looking at that and how to gradually change those habits so you don't feel like you're missing out on your best friend alcohol, but that you're just gradually changing how you're relating to alcohol and how you're consuming alcohol.
Yeah. Thank you much. And two, very quickly, I'll do a book promotion. Where is it? There we are.
Oh, yeah.
If anyone hasn't read it, or you've got an interest in it, The Cure for Alcoholism by Dr. Roy Scarpa down here.
Yeah.
You can buy it on Amazon. Katie and I don't make any money out of it. You can buy it on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle through Amazon, and you can get it on Audible as well. It was free on Audible. I don't know if it still is. But that's worth its weight in gold, just reading that, the history of the Sinclair method, how it came to be, and how it all works from a neurological point of view. The clinical trial. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. The clinical trials are all in there. It's a wealth of information. If you haven't read it, then please get hold of one. And the other book, Katie, I always recommend to people is Atomic Habits on the habitual side. Absolutely fantastic book, or anything along those sorts of lines. To do that. So these hours fly past.
I know.
Fly past.
That's a good thing, right? Time flies when you're having fun.
I was looking into, now again, this is just me looking into one of my random crazy ideas that I do that occasionally. I look at 20 random ideas and one of them ever comes to be. So it may come to be, it may not, but I was looking into a possibility of a TSM radio station.
Ooh.
So if anyone has any experience of online radio, could you please get in touch with me?
That's cool. Wow, Bruce. Is that different than like a podcast, or how is that different?
It's something that would be it's on live. It's on constantly. Or you'd have it on for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day. And there are apps where you can apply, and they'll give you have to pay for it, some of it, to whatever level. You can even get news every hour, and you can get different levels of sessions. So whether there'd be enough to talk about for TSM, whether we could mix it in with some music, don't know. I'm still pondering about it, but I just need to know how it works. And so it's just an idea at the moment. And then when we're asleep here in the UK, you could have it all running in the States.
Yeah.
have a daytime one in the States, and so there's one running all the time. So, but we'll see. I'll have a look at it and see. It possibly could be very expensive, so I don't know. Anyway, Thank you very much. I don't know if Karen's still here, but if she is here, thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Katie and Karen do an absolutely amazing job. Can you just explain what you do? And
so we offer a program. It's available worldwide. That is serving people on the Sinclair method. It's really a one-stop place to get everything you need to be successful on the Sinclair method, and it's all online through our website or the app. It's private. You do it on your own schedule. So some people find if they check in on the weekends, it's helpful. Some people check in for 15 minutes each day. But we have, live group calls several times a week. Bruce hosts one of those workshops. We're always doing sharing articles and tips and information to just really help people be successful with the Sinclair method. So that's the program we offer at Thrive Alcohol Recovery. And what about you, Bruce? Did you want to talk about your offering as well?
Yeah, well, we do a one-to-one program, just a slightly different model. It's a one-to-one program where I will do weekly appointments with clients, and we do these live questions. We have a doctor that we work with exclusively in the program, so he's one of the UK's leading addiction specialists. He actually did the no, I better not say too much, but he did the naltrexone trials here in the UK. So his knowledge on naltrexone and addiction is massive. We are so lucky. He's probably the best in the UK. and we're so lucky to have him on board with us. So he does all the medical side of things for us. He does all the prescribing for us, and I run the alcohol reduction program, talking people through one-to-one, either by Zoom or by phone, throughout the whole thing. So yeah, so if you're in the UK, give me a shout. If you're in the States or an online program is your thing, speak to Katie or Karen as well, or get in touch with Thrive. The only thing I would say, whoever you do it with, the one thing I have learned, and it's not just because it's what Katie and Karen and I do, but the one-to-one support or a program support, I would say, is vital. And it's not just because we do it, but I've seen so many people just take the medication and then hope that the pill's going to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
It will do a good chunk of it, but it's also very important to have people to support you and motivate you and say to you, okay, actually, you're doing okay. You're doing okay. You're where you need to be right now. Don't worry about it. Keep all that kind of stuff, explaining all the ups and downs of the whole process.
Yeah.
And just to have a community. The nice thing with Thrive is there's a community there of people where you can do it. And I know Katie will probably go red when I say this, and Karen, but the two of the most genuine, honest people in the industry. So I won't start going into it, but some people do things for money and some people do things because they genuinely want to help people. So Katie and Karen are in the second category. Was that right? I better make sure I got that right. They genuinely
and same to you, Bruce.
So
yeah, I'm so grateful that we've been able to meet you and connect with you, because we're always sending people to you if they're in the UK, because we don't know how the prescribing works over there and we don't have a doctor, and you just make it super easy for people. So we're always sending people to you as well. And I just want to say one last thing, that with regards to asking for support, for me, I was like very ashamed of asking for support. So my mindset when I started TSM was like, I'm going to figure this out on my own. Like, I don't want to involve anyone else. And I think I see that with others as well. But what I realized a few months in when I started going to see a psychologist was that, okay, I do need more support than I realized. And back then there weren't Sinclair method programs or anything like what we offer now. So I think just being aware that whether it's pride or whether it's shame that prevents someone from asking for help, just be aware of that, because that, it may not serve you in the long run, to kind of, have that mindset and try to do it on your own. So that was my personal experience. At least I was very much ashamed and maybe prideful that I can figure it out on my own. But I ended up needing support a few months in because a lot of stuff was surfacing for me. And just wanted to say that.
Yeah. So yeah, well done. So, and maybe. This is a big maybe. Maybe Karen will join us next month. I don't know. I'm not putting any pressure on Karen, but if you'd like to join us, Karen, you're more than welcome. If not, I don't want to keep pushing you. But if you don't come, I'll shoot you. No, I won't.
If you don't come, we're not friends anymore.
I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, right. Thank you very much again. Thank you, everyone. Steve's just saying unicycling to the North Pole. I'm actually struggling with an injury at the moment, Steve. I fell off, believe it or not. That's right. I fell off my unicycle and I've done something to that shoulder. Which shoulder is it? That shoulder.
Oh
no. So I went all the way around the NC 500, no problem at all, and then went to local, what do you call it, Walmart car park, and fell off there and did something to my shoulder. So Katie's agreed to learn to unicycle and surf because her husband's a major surfer, and the next program we're doing is in fluent French because Katie's fluent French. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you all next month. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, everyone, so much. Bye.
Bye.